Hello, this is Dr. Evelyn Hill with Shades in Justice podcast. Hey, we're so excited you decided to stop by. Hey, you can catch us every Wednesday evening, 8:30 Central Standard Time or 9:30 Eastern Time. We want to see you right here at Positive Power Christian Radio. Again, this is Dr. Evelyn Hill with Shades and Justice podcast, a chance where you can hear about justice and injustices here in our country. Again, Dr. Evelyn Hill with Shades in Justice podcast. Hello and welcome to Shades and Justice podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Evelyn Hill, and we are so excited that you decided to stop by on today. Remember, you can always catch me at www.drevelynhill.net. And hey, do we have a wonderful guest on today, the Mayor of Atchison County, the one and the only Rochelle Young. Welcome, Mayor Young.
Thank you. Thank you. It's so great to be here and just wonderful. And as we love to say, it's a great day here in the city of Atchison. So just happy to be here with you.
Well, thank you. It is a beautiful sunny day right here in Wyandotte County also. So it is my pleasure to have this opportunity just to chat with you and just see and hear about the fantastic things you are doing in the beautiful city of Atchison. So just to get us started on today, Mayor Young, do you mind sharing a little bit about your background, where you were born, and a little bit about your parents and history and siblings, any of that? You are welcome to start sharing.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Dr. Hill. And it is just always a pleasure to speak with you, to just be in your presence. You are just an awesome and phenomenal woman, a woman that I was so happy to meet when I was working for a Department for Children and Families. And just you're a wonderful woman of faith. You're just obviously so intelligent. I just love you as a mentor, and you're just such an inspiration to women everywhere. And I just thank you for that. So it's just my honor.
Oh, and thank you. My goodness.
Yes. Well, I was born in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. So my parents are the late Walter Murray and Joanne Murray, I'm fortunate to still have my mother with me. My mother is originally from Atchison, Kansas. My father was born in Des Moines, Iowa. And they spent the first 23 years of their marriage in Iowa. And I spent the first 9 years in Iowa. And then when I was, just short of my 10th birthday, we moved to my mother's hometown, Atchison, Kansas. And so that's where I did most of my rearing. My mother's family are farmers, and my grandfather, Ellsworth Boldridge, was one of the first African Americans to own land in Atchison County. So I'm in the city of Atchison, the mayor of the city of Atchison, but for Atchison County, he was one of the first African Americans. And that really instilled in me that really there are no limits. And I am a woman of faith, and God does not put limits on us. And I was fortunate to be able to grow up in a city where that was embraced. And it was wonderful. My father was an entrepreneur, as well as my mother. They had a barbershop and a beauty salon for many, many years in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and here in Atchison. And it was nice to see my dad really get involved in the city. He was part of the Chamber of Commerce. He ran for county commissioner. He did a lot of wonderful things in the business community. My maternal grandmother, my mother's mother, in the late 1950s, she and my oldest uncle on my mother's side of the family started the first NAACP branch here in Atchison, Kansas. And so I grew up, with strong leadership, and knowing that there is nothing, if I put my mind to it, if I worked hard, that I could not achieve. And it's just such a blessing. Growing up in Atchison, I was involved in NAACP Youth, my church, which was African Methodist Episcopal. I also was in 4-H because, of course, I grew up on a farm, and I love farming and all of that. So I had the bucket calf, I had the pig, but I also did the presentations, the photography, the baking, the horticulture, all of those things. And all of those things combined have really helped me focus on who I am. It also helped me understand that there are differences, obviously, but our differences together, united, make us stronger. And that sharing who you are and knowing who you are, and as a woman of faith, knowing whose you are, we may encounter difficulties, that's life, but we can really make it through. So I graduated from Atchison High School, and then I became a Jayhawk, which was interesting because growing up in Atchison County Extension and 4-H, that's wildcat territory, But I always wanted to be a Jayhawk, and
Yes.
so I was at KU. I threw myself into the KU marching band and other organizations, and I was in the journalism school, and it was phenomenal. During that time, when I was a junior, my junior second semester year, I decided I wanted to do something a little bit different. And I decided, well, let me see if I can be an intern in Washington, D.C. And let me back up a bit. So when I was in high school, I was selected to be part of Sunflower Girl State. And again, that was something that the community really helped me with, and I was selected. And I think it was at that point that I really got bitten by the political bug, because at Girl State, you learn about state government, and you meet all of these wonderful young women who are just like you. And
Mhm.
it's fantastic. Now, unlike my daughter, who became a Supreme Court justice at Sunflower Girl State last year, I ran for governor and lost. And I lost. And when I called my father, and I just started crying, because that's really the first thing that I ever lost at that point. But character building. But I loved it. And then
Mhm.
my senior year in high school, I was selected to be a part of the second class of National Youth Leadership Congress in Washington, D.C. And I thought, this is really fantastic. I really think that I could do something like this.
Mhm.
And it wasn't, though, really until I interned in the late Senator Bob Dole's office that I understood the politics, government. I understood governing with humility,
Mhm.
because Senator Dole governed with humility. And I think sometimes people would come to him, the media, and you get just a short clip.
Yes.
Sometimes that does not really give you the entire individual. And he was a kind and wise man. And I was very fortunate to be able to work in his Capitol office the majority of the time that I was there. So I was working, the Republican leader's office in the United States Capitol was the original Library of Congress.
Mhm.
So when we learn about history and the Library of Congress burned, That was literally the office that I was in. And it was neat in that the interns at that time had the best view in Washington. So if you can think of
Mm.
the Capitol and you see the mall in front of you and you see the Washington Monument, that was my view. And it was great, but it also made me homesick. So, I'm sitting there and we're interns. So it's like a cubicle, and there's three of us that are sharing the cubicle, and we would take turns being at the window because there was a desk at the window, and then there were two desks on either side of the
Uh-huh.
window. And so we
Uh-huh.
would take turns rotating. And I
Uh-huh.
remember one day I thought, La Rochelle, you have to be out of your mind. This is so beautiful. But yet I was so sad because I missed home. But
Oh yeah. Yeah.
it was a phenomenal time. Senator Dole was magnificent. His staff was as well. We were able to see actually be at the State of the Union address, which at that time Bill Clinton was president. So President Clinton, it
Mhm.
happened to be one of his longest speeches, and there was a congressman that I was standing on a cushion, and he said, "Okay, I'm leaving, but you can have my seat." And so I actually was able to sit in the congressman's seat and
Wow.
listen.
Oh my goodness.
But it was a
Well,
time of great learning.
yeah. So, Mayor La Rochelle Young, my goodness, I thought I knew a little bit about you, but no, I know nothing about you according to what you just shared. Number one, that you actually uh, spent time in Iowa where your parents met and were
Mhm,
married, and
mhm,
then that they both were entrepreneurs and ran a
mhm,
barbershop and a beauty shop in Atchison when they moved back to Atchison, your mom's
mhm,
hometown,
mhm,
when you were almost 10. And
mhm.
then to hear that your uncle started the NAACP in Atchison,
Yeah, my
and your
grandmother and my uncle.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And then that meant that they were a vital part of a community. And then you have this Vogue look like you're straight out of a modeling school,
Oh,
and to
thank you.
learn that you were a farmer with pigs and
Oh
cows and
yeah.
won contests with baking. Oh my goodness. What a rich, rich background. I'm so
Mhm,
honored to be having this conversation with you. I
mhm.
had no idea that as an intern, you interned in Washington, D.C.
I did.
Wow.
I
Well,
did.
what a wonderful, I'm so glad that we had a chance to hear of
Mhm,
such incredible opportunities that you enjoyed at such a young age. So, when you were
mhm.
an intern, how old were you then?
I was 20, so I
Okay.
was always on the younger end, and
Okay.
it
Okay.
was nice. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So, early on, you got that bug to do something in
Hmm.
your community to make a difference, and
Hmm.
it just runs in your blood,
Hmm.
because of grandma and your uncle and your mother and
Hmm.
father. It just runs rampant in your blood, so you
Hmm.
literally can't help yourself. You are just there for such a time as this, and I appreciate it so much. Your
Hmm.
comments about you being a woman of faith, and there are no limits on God, and it
Hmm.
was really something I needed to hear specifically today. So thank you for that.
Hmm.
So we're going to move on to maybe another question. Um, who inspired you to run for mayor?
It had to be the community because I left Kansas and worked in Washington, D.C. for now former Ambassador Sam Brownback. And I worked in his Senate office for, oh gosh, 12 or a little over 12 years as a senior policy advisor. And I got to do a lot of wonderful things in Washington. I was able to be a part of creating the framework for the National Museum of African American History and Culture, which is the newest Smithsonian museum on the Mall. I did work in prison reform, all of these things. All
Hmm.
of these things that I did while I was in Washington could not have happened without the community support and everything that I did, as I shared with you growing up. And when I returned to Kansas in 2014, and I had worked for DCF and I did all of these things, I thought, it's time that I give back to a community that has given so much to me
Hmm.
and a community that has supported me, that has supported my family, that my family has helped to create more opportunities to have a more richer tapestry.
Uh-huh.
And when there was an opportunity to fill a vacancy, I thought, well, let me submit my resume. I didn't have any expectations. I just said, let me just start here. And because
Uh-huh.
I felt guilty that I hadn't really been doing a lot. And,
Uh-huh.
they selected me, the commission selected me, they voted for me unanimously, and I was able to start serving December of 2022. And when we went through an election, I wasn't up because I was fulfilling someone else's term, and that person had just received their term, but they moved on to the
Okay.
county commission.
Hmm.
It was time for us to choose a new mayor, and my colleagues selected me, and so. Again, I didn't expect that. It's an honor to be able to serve and to be
Wow.
able
Well,
to use the
go ahead.
background that I learned in Washington here.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. You just
Oh
got
no.
me all excited. So I looked at the commissioners in your city. Could
Mhm.
you describe their demographics?
Sure. So Atchison, Kansas is a smaller city in Atchison. It generally hovers around 10 to 11,000.
Hmm.
At some point we were 12, but we generally hover around between 10 and 12,000. Uh,
Uh-huh.
we are not as diverse as some of the cities in Kansas. And so
Hmm.
we have a small minority population. Roughly
Hmm.
around 1% is African American, and
Okay.
then you go down from there. But on the commission, I work with all gentlemen, so there are five of us, and there are four of them. I have another fellow commissioner who is African American, and
Okay.
then the rest are Caucasian. And
Okay.
so it's great. I've always worked where I have either been either the only woman or the only racial minority. And if I could tell this quick story, when I was in Washington and we were working on the National Museum of African American History and Culture, and that bill, out of all of the bills that I worked on, showed me the legislative process the most because it was the most difficult to get through, even though people think, well, why would it be? But it was.
Hmm.
And Bill Frist was the majority leader at the time in the United States Senate. And I had a meeting in Sam's office, in Senator Brownback's office, and
Uh-huh.
I had all of the leadership staff from the House and the Senate. And my friend from Majority Leader Frist's office came, and she was a female like me, happened to be Caucasian. And she
Uh-huh.
stepped in the room, then she stepped back and she looked at me. She said, La Rochelle, why are there so many men in this room? Because we were the only two. Now, I had the thought never even crossed my mind because to me, it's like you have a goal and then you go for that goal,
Yes.
And so
Yes.
I
Yes.
I stepped back and I looked at the room. I'm like, oh well, she's right. Oh well, we move along.
Oh my, thank you for sharing that story. And I just appreciate your courage and your ability to move forward. You have um, just shared some wonderful experiences and stories that are phenomenal. And you have been very, very positive all the way. But do you mind just sharing maybe one or two challenges? You mentioned um, working with that legislative process to get that one bill.
Mhm.
that was difficult.
Mhm.
But maybe there's something else where you can be give a little more detail on how challenging maybe a particular project was,
Mhm.
or a relationship that might
Mhm.
have been challenging along the way.
Sure. And the museum bill, I think, is a great example of that. There was a bill called the Second Chance Act of 2007 that was a prison reform bill that I worked on as well. And so I'll share a little bit with you on that. That
Hmm.
particular bill, we had to create a left-right coalition. So I worked for Sam Brownback, who was very conservative but who was very well respected across the aisle. And
Hmm.
he had attended several NAACP national conventions and spoke at the national conventions because he really believed that even though there may be things that we fundamentally disagree on legislatively, that we can come together and we can work on things that we do agree on. And so
Hmm.
prison recidivism was one of those areas where he really felt that there needed to be something in place to help individuals that were coming out of the prison system to be able to connect back to the community and be positive contributors to
Hmm.
the community, to themselves, to be stabilized.
Hmm.
And he believed in that wholeheartedly. So we joined with the Open Society. So we had prison fellowship ministries with Chuck Colson, very conservative, and we had Open Society, George Soros, and I was working with these two organizations. You can't get more farther apart. And
Yeah.
we had a difficult time with sometimes it was the Democrats, sometimes it was the Republicans. And I can remember I frustrated so much my Republican colleagues sometimes until they were just like, just irate because I'm like, no, we really need to do this. And they're like, are you kidding me? So, the philosophical divide, I
Yeah.
wasn't sure we were going to be able to cross it. And so I would say, you know what? Let's table this and I will call you tomorrow so that we can
Good. That's
reapproach.
good.
So it's just you have to have tenacity, you have to have the
Yes.
willingness to
Yes.
see the other person's side. You may not agree with it, but
Uh-huh.
to understand where they're coming from and just to continue to communicate.
Yes. Well, thank you for sharing that. I think it's important for our listeners to know, as positive as you are, I love two things. Number one, that you were kind and you encouraged others around you to be kind because of your behavior. And then number two, in spite of the fact of the distinct differences, you were still able to move forward, and you knew when to say, "Okay, let's take a break. We'll just rest over this tonight, and then we'll get back with it in the morning." I think there's a lot of wisdom there. When you could have insisted and no, we're not going to stop until you get this done, and you all are,
That's
we need
right.
to switch you to the way I think. I just think you used a
That's right.
lot of wisdom, and so I appreciate that so much. So, um, as we look at our nation and we have so many challenging things happening right now, what are some of the strategies that really affected you over the years that may have affected your decision for community change?
For community change.
Hmm.
I look at when I was in Washington for all of those years, I was 20. I was 20 and I was 30.
Uh-huh.
And it wasn't really until I moved back to
Hmm.
Atchison and to Kansas, and when I
Hmm.
worked for the Department for Children and Families,
Hmm.
that's where I think I saw clearly what was happening.
Hmm.
And even though we are Kansas and we are a Midwestern state, we still struggle with some of the same challenges that our larger counterparts do.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's even true with some of our smaller areas as well. And everyone deserves to be safe.
Yes.
Everyone deserves to have economic opportunity.
Hmm.
Every child deserves to have a loving family.
Hmm.
And I think one of the things that really helped me with Department for Children and Families, two things. One, I was an assistant regional director for community affairs, which meant that I handled a lot of the complaints that came through the office. I was the community liaison, but I was in contact with both the economic side of DCF, so
Hmm.
what people typically food assistance,
Hmm.
etc., but then also the child side of it, where we have the foster care. And what I think a lot of times people don't realize that uh, foster care is the last thing that DCF wants. We want family
Right.
reunification, and
Yes.
they work
Right.
hard to try to keep that family reunification and to see families fighting and to see an organization fighting and individuals fighting to
Hmm.
keep families stable.
Hmm.
That really affected me.
Hmm. Those are hard, not just hard conversations. That is hard, real life situations. Let me just share briefly. A few years ago, there was a baby who was found in the backyard. This baby was 4 years old. And it upset the police so much. I knew a couple of the officers who were at the scene of the crime. They were in tears. The problem was um, the balance. Do we leave the child with the parent who had a mental disability or with
Mm,
the grandparents
mm,
who was, just trying to get the baby, hoping that they could get the baby
mhm,
totally from the parent and their significant other. And it just ended up, as you can hear, very tragically.
mhm,
There's no one to blame in the situation. It's
mhm,
just such an unfortunate thing.
mhm,
And but I remember before the death of the child that it had been on, they had went, different family members had went to the uh,
mhm,
TV channels to try to figure out ways that we could keep the
mhm,
child safe. And
mhm,
so when I think about situations like that, I often think, did we as a community fail the child? So I don't have any answers for that. I just
mhm,
know that you and I and probably thousands and thousands of other people want to make sure that children are safe. They're in an
mhm,
environment where they're loved and they're safe, and we just have to continue to work in that, and
mhm,
to
mhm,
make sure that the children are in
mhm,
these safe environments. And
mhm,
it just breaks our heart, and
mhm,
it's a tough. I worked with industries where folks were unhoused or they were called
mhm,
homeless. They now call them unhoused residents, and
mhm,
it's just a tough situation. Um,
mhm,
there is no one um, thing that says all homeless people are this way. No, there,
mhm,
that is not
mhm,
correct information. Whole
mhm,
families. I've witnessed a mom and her children living in a car. I witnessed several. And how do we make a difference with that? So we
mhm,
got lots of work to do. So
mhm,
you are a mayor in Atchison, um, and with our position here in Wyandotte County, none of these are easy,
mhm,
breezy solutions. These take
mhm.
time. We have to work on both sides of the aisles to get things done. So I
Yes,
so
we do.
appreciate your tenacity and
mm,
your willingness to work on these tough situations. And
mm,
thank you for working in DCF.
mm,
That's tough that you
mhm,
came from DC to Kansas and worked
mhm,
with DCF. And
mhm,
wow, the challenges just don't end. I mean,
mm,
it's
mm.
plenty of work to do
That's
everywhere.
right. That's right.
Plenty of work. Um, so um, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. I've heard many people say many things about what happened recently here in
Mm,
Kansas City during
yeah,
the Kansas City Chiefs Celebration
yeah,
Parade. How
yeah.
did that affect you and maybe some of your residents in Atchison?
Well, we had some of our residents who were at the parade,
Mhm,
and my daughter had several classmates whose families actually were at the parade. They had actually left prior to the shooting. I
mhm.
think it was a profound sadness
Yes.
throughout
Hmm.
our city.
Yeah.
We're not that far from
Hmm.
Kansas City. The Chiefs have a unique ability to connect us,
Hmm.
connect Kansas City, Kansas, Kansas City, Missouri, to
Hmm.
connect the states, Kansas
Yes.
and Missouri. And
Hmm.
it was profoundly hurtful
Hmm.
that a tragedy such as that could happen. And I
Hmm.
don't think that anyone felt that violence like that would take place uh, in in our vicinity, in our city, in our town.
Hmm.
And it was just a profound sense of sadness, a profound sense of shock.
Hmm.
I'm heartened that people were able to wrap around the victims, to
Hmm.
wrap around the family who lost a loved one. I was heartened to see that the hospitals, specifically the Children's Mercy Hospital, had been proactive and had folks down there. I think the city, the individual citizens, and I think this is the key in that it could have been so much worse, but
Right.
that individual citizens put their lives second to try
Yes.
and stop these
Hmm.
shooters. And
Hmm. Hmm.
I think we live in a culture now where we need to understand that we need to care about our fellow
Hmm.
person, our fellow human being. It's that
Hmm.
agape love
Hmm.
that we learn about. I learned about it through my church, but it's something that Dr. King modeled, where you care
Right.
more about humanity than you do about
Hmm.
yourself. It's something
Hmm.
that as Christians we know that Jesus had, that we
Hmm.
model, that servant leadership. Uh,
Hmm.
model. And I think we need to get back to that. And I
Yeah.
think that
Yeah.
the shooting caused us to really take a step back
Hmm.
and figure out how do we address these issues? It's a complex issue. It's not just one thing. It's
Right. Right.
multifaceted.
Hmm.
We have to have the courage, though, to deal with those multifaceted issues.
Hmm. Thank you for sharing that. And I didn't realize your daughter was there,
She
but
she wasn't. She had classmates that were there.
classmates, but they
Mhm.
left before the shootings
They did.
occurred. Yeah,
They did.
well, good. I'm glad they were safe. And the
Mhm.
one young lady who did pass was a friend of
Mhm.
several people that I knew.
Mhm.
And so, yes, we're going to have to figure out what we can do. And again, we live in a society that blames this or blames that. I'm
Mhm.
not in it for the blame
Mhm.
game, but what I
Mhm.
am in it for is what's the solution? How can we work
Mhm.
together to find a solution for this?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so that we do not have to continue to see these types of incidences
Mhm.
happening in our cities.
Mhm.
So it turned immediately from a joyful event to very sad event, and the
Mhm.
community was just kind of stunned
Mhm.
for, several days. And
Mhm.
so it did
Mhm.
bring about churches and other
Mhm.
civic leaders and individual families pulled together to put money um, in
Mhm.
uh, some financial vehicles so that we could help
Mhm.
those families who were affected
Mhm.
specifically during
Mhm.
that time. So thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that. And
Mhm.
and so I'm gonna lighten the load a little bit. What have you done lately to really encourage our young people, young ladies, young men, if it's in the political realm or any other opportunity. So,
Mhm.
how old is your daughter and her
Mhm.
friend? Maybe you cook cupcakes or something for them.
Yeah, I know. I know. Well, it's swim team season, so I'm not I'm not sure about the cupcake. Swimming season. But I was invited to speak to the Atchison High School for their African American History and Culture program. And it was a wonderful opportunity to connect with all of the young people and to encourage them to really look at because African American history is American history.
Yes,
It's our history. It's our collective shared history. And
yes,
to not just look at the bad, but look at the good,
yes, yes,
because we do, it's a tough history, but
yes.
it's a history that really pushed America to really get to the ideals of freedom
Mm-hmm,
and prosperity. And yes, we still have a ways to go, but we are so much better than we started out. So that's one
mm-hmm.
thing. The other thing, I encourage them to come to our city commission meetings. They, if come to them,
Yes.
find out how the city operates,
Mm-hmm,
because someone might be interested in either sitting on the city commission, becoming a city manager, becoming a director of operations, or what have you. We have a fabulous gentleman who is over all of our the land and all of the projects, and he knows absolutely everything there is to
wow.
know.
Mm-hmm,
So it would be good for young people to see that, and I offered that to them. We
mm-hmm,
also in October had a group of young people who spoke on behalf of the Crown Act, which of course
mm-hmm.
governs ethnic hair. And they were encouraging us to adopt a resolution. And we actually went into our regulation and amended it so that it would reflect the Crown Act. We were the second city in Kansas to adopt that. And that
Wow.
was wonderful because we saw young people being engaged.
Mm-hmm,
And I encouraged all of the young people, please be engaged. And
mm-hmm.
I will have an opportunity next week to speak to another group of young students. So it's important for us to really encourage the education of our government, and then
Mm-hmm.
also to encourage young people to really look at that as a possible career path.
Hmm. I love what you said about encouraging the young people. Um, and I think I've heard some adults, young adults also, who have, um, you know, just shared their displeasure of what's happening on the political landscape these
Mhm.
days. And so for those who find things a little bit challenging that they don't want to participate at all, what would you say to those, both old and young?
Well, for those who are more seasoned, I would say don't give up.
Yeah,
Don't give up on your community. Don't give
yeah,
up on your nation.
hmm,
Don't give up.
yeah,
I know that it can be tiring, but
hmm,
we must redouble our efforts. Do what you need to do to be refreshed, but don't give up.
yes.
For young people, get involved. Get involved in your
Ah,
community.
yes,
We
yes.
enjoy the
Hmm,
privileges that
hmm,
we have as Americans because someone
hmm,
else sacrificed.
hmm.
And now it's our turn to sacrifice. So
Yes.
don't just
Yes.
stand back
Yes.
and criticize.
Mhm.
Actually put some skin in the game is what we is what we
Exactly.
say. Actually
Exactly.
get involved.
Hmm. Oh my gosh, that is wonderful. So you've addressed all age groups, the old and the young. Do you have a couple of other tips that you might want to share for maybe young women who have experienced some tough times? What would you say to those young women today, or even older women, depending on their circumstances, those
Mhm.
who are discouraged, those who are depressed, who seems like life
Mhm.
is never going to be easy. What would you say to those women today?
Mhm. Sure. And I thought about because you asked me about five things. And so
Yes,
I
yes,
thought and I prayed about it. And so these are the things that through prayer I came up with. And again, I'm a woman of faith and
yes,
it's just that's where I go. So
yes,
one thing is we need to learn to take care of ourselves. We need to take care of our
yes,
needs.
yes,
We need to
yes,
take care of our spiritual needs, our physical needs, and our emotional needs.
yes,
Because if we don't take care of ourselves, we will not be able to do anything for anyone else. And as women, sometimes we think we need to take a back seat to
yes.
that, but
Hmm.
we really need to take time to take care of our emotional health,
Hmm.
to take care time for spiritual and then also
Hmm.
physical. And for me in the mornings, and I try very hard to get up at 5 and I'm at the YMCA and I walk a lot. And
Hmm.
during my walk time, that's my spiritual time. That's my time to connect. I have gospel music that I listen to, and I'm able to
Hmm.
really reconnect. So those are
Hmm.
those are things that are important. Second, take stock of your home. Take
Ah,
stock of your home. We know that the home is the first ministry, right?
yes.
So we need to minister, whether that's just to ourselves or whether we are in a marriage or whether we are single parenting. We need to take stock of our home and make sure that the individuals in our home
Hmm.
are taken care of and that our home is a place of peace
Hmm.
and rest and rejuvenation.
Hmm.
And that's the first ministry is the home. So first thing,
Hmm.
take care of ourselves. Secondly,
Right.
take stock of our home. Third,
Hmm.
take stock of our communities and
Hmm.
identify gaps. And that's one thing. When I worked for DCF, there was an organization that came to Kansas, and what came out of that particular symposium was an effort to reduce the number of young people who were identified as homeless and really
Yes,
create a
yes,
program that with wraparound services. And of course, I'm
yes.
talking about Avenue of Life
Of course,
and
yes,
Impact. It started out Impact Wednesday, but it's Impact KC now.
yes.
And that was a program that actually works and continues to
Right.
work because of
Absolutely.
the
Yes,
framework. So we need to take stock and look around and see where are there gaps.
yes,
And
yes.
then once you do that, take inventory of where you can expand your energies. We can't
Ooh,
be everything
everywhere. Yeah,
to
yeah,
everywhere and to everybody, even
yes,
though those of us who are busy, people tend to come to us and say, "Can you do just this one more thing?"
yes.
But we have to choose wisely. If I am going to spend X amount of time away from my home, perhaps
Hmm.
away from my children, perhaps away from my significant other,
Hmm.
where could I best put my energy?
Hmm.
And once you identify that, then we act.
Hmm.
And it's important not just to act, but to act deliberately, strategically, and ethically.
Hmm.
And just because you act, we can't just look at the ends justify the means. I had to reevaluate my tactics as well because, DC, Capitol Hill, it can be rough and tumble.
Yes, yes,
But
yes,
we can't let ourselves just lose our ethics. That's
yes.
not a good thing to do. and
Yes.
so do that. But in terms of really rejuvenating, it's the first one that is so important, is that we have to take care of ourselves, and there is no shame in saying I need help, because we
Yes.
all need help.
Right.
We all need help. I have a prayer partner. I go
Uh-huh.
to her all the time. She comes
Hmm.
to me, and
Hmm.
there's no shame in that. But
Right.
we really have to take care of ourselves, because that's where we will get that rejuvenation. Because my dad had the saying, even iron wears out. So
Wow, that's
um,
right. Yes.
we do. We have to take care of ourselves.
Oh my goodness, that was phenomenal. And just as you were starting in on the first one about taking care of yourself, immediately my finger went back to me like, okay,
Mhm,
Evelyn, here it
mhm.
is again. I've heard it the last 2 or 3 weeks, so maybe I'm catching on now. But that's something I really do need to do. Um, and just getting away for a minute, just to rejuvenate, refresh, revive, is an awesome, awesome word of encouragement for all of us. Well, Mayor La Rochelle Young, thank you so much for this incredible show. This interview was so very, very good. Thank you for your time. And before we go, would you like to have final words, or if someone wanted to contact you, is there any information that you would like to share, even in that regard?
Sure. So I am on the city's webpage. If you go to cityofatchison.com and you look for commissioners, and you'll have my contact information is there. I have a
Okay.
Gmail account. It's my name, La Rochelle Young, at gmail.com. And I would love to hear from you. I would love to share with you, because we have such an incredible city. And Dr. Hill, it is always Commissioner Hill. It is always a pleasure. You are such a bright light for so many, so many in our community, so many women, and you're just so strong and vibrant, and you're just such an encourager and encouragement, and you're excellent in everything you do. And I better having known you, and I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that my daughter says hello. She loves Dr. Hill.
Right. Be sure and tell her I said hi
Yes,
back.
yes,
She's so
yes.
beautiful. But
Mhm.
she can't help it. Look who her mom is and her
Oh, you
grandmother.
guys.
She can't help it.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Well,
Thank you
well,
so
thank
much.
you. You have been such a blessing to me, a blessing to our state, our community, and our nation. And we didn't even know it. I had no idea you was working at the Capitol all those years. So thank
Mm.
you for your continued service uh, to mankind. Thank you for
Oh,
that.
well, I
And
appreciate that.
yeah.
I appreciate
Okay.
that.
Well,
Oh, Dr.
go
Hill,
ahead.
if I may, I would love to share a scripture that
Oh, please.
has meant the world to me, and one that I would love to share. It's Philippians 4:8,
Yes.
and it says King James Version, and it says, "Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, and if there be any praise, think on these things."
Oh, that's awesome. Because it's a lot of things to think about.
Yeah,
But if we focus on those things,
yeah.
it will definitely inspire us to keep going. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right. This is
Okay.
Dr. Evelyn Hill with the one and only Mayor La Rochelle Young. And you can catch us at www.drevelynhill.net. Shades Injustice Podcast. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.
Hey, thanks for being at our show on tonight. This is Dr. Evelyn Hill with Shades Injustice Podcast. Another great evening to be alive. Hey, this is Positive Power Christian Radio. Dr. Evelyn Hill with Shades in Justice Podcast. Hey, see you next time. You can meet me every Wednesday at 8:30 Central Standard Time or 9:30 Eastern Standard Time right here at Positive Power Christian Radio. See you next time. Bye.